Okay. Okay. So just, I guess you can stay too complicated to say. We'll just say that the very Father, so that goes to him. Hail Mary, full of grace, Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou, women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Saint Vincent Ferrer, Saint Jude, Lady of Victory, Lady of Sorrows, Lady of Christians, Saint Ignatius. Next is 45 also. 45. So then, in any case, just the essence of the system we explain here. So remember, the conclusion of modernism is going to be, there's going to be only two elements. That's what's going to be the conclusion. Religion is going to be completely gone, right? And the St. Vincent points out that there's stages of this modernist world. This is a summary of the whole, how the process works. Over here in this second chart, beyond the phenomena is big, it's smaller. The visible gets bigger. And remember about the visible world and the conscious. We must understand that this world is not a world of free will, and it's not a world of freedom. It's a very cold and hard communistic world, because you'll notice communism is essentially the same. One thing that's becoming very noticeable in the world in general, you'll notice it happening in music and in culture in general. The differences between peoples, the differences between religions, the differences between music, like in this part of the world, in the country here, I think even in the 80s, whatever, if you listen to country music, you don't listen to rock and roll. Listen to rock and roll, you don't listen to country. Now you can't tell the difference between any of them, and everybody listens across the board. And everything is becoming the same, all the way across the board. There is a unification happening. This unification is not by accident, it is a preparation for the coming of the Antichrist. If you put the forces behind modernism into the picture, they are Satanists, and they are preparing the world for the coming of the Antichrist. But in order for the world to be ready for the Antichrist, the people have to be ready. St. Basil points this out in one of his sermons on the crucifixion of Christ. He says, look at the year 30 AD. Annas, Caiaphas, Herod, Pilate. All of them were just as evil in the year 30 as they were in the year 33. All of them were ready to crucify Christ right away in the year 30, just as ready as they were in the year 33. We don't notice any change in Annas, Caiaphas, Herod, or Pilate. In other words, the great leaders genuinely tend to be evil, and if they're not evil, they easily succumb to evil. Just pay them enough money or give them enough pleasures. But why is it that it took 3.5 years to crucify Christ? And St. Basil points out the reason, he says, is the crowd. The crowd. Says the crowd had to be transformed into a mob. And crowd and mob are not the same thing. There was a process of changing the crowd into a mob. That's what had to happen. And when the crowd was ready to turn into a mob, then they crucified Christ. So likewise, in the preparation for the Antichrist, who will be the most wicked leader of all time, the mob, that is the crowd of men, have to be transformed into a mob. They have to be readied so that when the man of evil comes, they will stand up and follow him. They will stand up and adore him. They will blindly obey him. They will follow him. That's what they're going to do when the mob comes, when the Antichrist comes. So this is the forces who created this heresy of modernism, which is essentially really the closest thing we can get to the satanic mind, slowly being pushed into everyone's heads. We notice that the modernist thinking, the modernist spirit, the modernist mentality, the modernist ideology is now in almost every person. Now that it's in almost every person, the world is ready for the Antichrist to come. It was well on the way to being almost in every person in 1907. It is almost in every person in 2017. We have to note that it's the same error, same heresy that's heading in this direction. The direction being The only world is going to be a cold, visible, material world ruled by a bunch of Mr. Spocks. And a bunch of, you'll notice these in the 1950s movies about science fiction movies, and movies in the 40s and 50s and so on. All the time when you see aliens, or when you see disease and massive death and destruction, there's always a scientist. And the scientist says, well, I don't really believe in the morality of killing or not killing. It's just, this is the reality, this is what happens. A bullet goes through a guy's head, it blows apart. This is what happens in culture, and I can only tell you the scientific thing. I can only tell you the material thing. I can only tell you what science has to say. I can only tell you what science has to say, what science has to say. And at the end of the world, there's going to be only scientists. And these scientists are going to rule every aspect of society. Remember that whenever there's a crime, there's always a criminal. Somebody's benefiting from the crime. Who's the criminal that's benefiting from modernism? Who's the criminal that's getting more and more powerful, more and more wealthy? It's the scientist. Scientist and the modern doctor. These are the ones. They are governing and ruling the world. And then, of course, the journalist. Journalist is like the historian. We'll find that all they are is these seven heads showing themselves. Now, St. Pius, the goal is to destroy all religion, destroy all free will, destroy all freedom of any kind, including natural freedoms. Like, for instance, I remember seeing or hearing on Alex Jones' radio about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, it was a radio thing, and a guy is in, it says the future, and there's a guy who calls up, Ralph's Hamburgers. Yeah, he calls up the phone and goes, hello, goes, hi Ted Johnson, how are you? Oh, well, I'm calling to order a double cheeseburger. Well, with your heart condition, you really shouldn't be having that. And with your doctor said because of your diabetes, you really shouldn't have that. But we're willing to give you the hamburger as long as you sign off this little form and pay $275 for the burger. We have this nice salad, which has been approved by the doctor for you. You want to deliver it in the parking lot with your girlfriend? Or do you want to come over and get it? So that the guy calls up a fast food place. Fast food place knows his medical history. Fast food place knows what he's allowed to eat, what he's not allowed to eat. Fast food place has approved foods for him, and he has no choice but to get the 25-cent salad. Or the $335 hamburger if he wants. So that you can see the world is heading into a situation where it's going to become illegal to be fat. It's going to become illegal to be unhealthy. It's going to become illegal to say any word that is not considered appropriate. The so-called political correctness. And the penalty will be torture, prison, death. People generally aren't looking forward to that kind of a world. In a recent survey, the average person did not want to be a total slave in every aspect of his life and live in complete torture and pain. So how do you prepare for that world? You prepare for it by lies. You prepare for it by deception. And so here are the 7 deceptions. Now there are many other ones. Modernism is such a huge heresy. One of the great miracles of St. Pius X is to summarize such a massive heresy into this little document. And he says, you must understand it, because the modernist wants you to believe that he is divided. So remember, this is what we're after. In modernism, we're going to a world in which there is no God, no free will. Everything is going to be controlled by the government on the outside, by the psychiatrist, by the psychologist, and by the family, what do you call the social worker on the inside. Social worker and psychiatrist and psychologist will control your home. And the doctor will control your food. And the scientist and the government will control every movement of your life. And everyone has a total of one option. Except, of course, the king and the modernist himself. He has other options. But everyone else is only one. That's the goal. When you want to destroy people and culture like that, the only way to do it is through deception. St. Pius X wants to point out that deception, and then he wants to take practical steps, which he did do, to wage war against it. And it was a great miracle that he did so. The world was ready for Vatican II in 1907, or 1903 when he was elected Pope. There were already Masonic cardinals. There was already great wickedness throughout the entire world. The world was ready for the New World Order. One Italian peasant stood up and changed it all. We'll see in history St. Pius X, one of the greatest churchmen and greatest saints that ever lived, his ability to take practical steps to obliterate. But first of all, we've got to understand. So here's one way to draw it. He said that imagine that you've got a trench, and we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 holes. 7 different guys you're shooting at. St. Pius is going to point out, you got to kill these 7 guys. What you don't realize is that there's a trench underneath these 7 guys. And you're only shooting at one guy. When this guy here is shooting at you, and you get him, now you shoot at that guy, he actually drops down and pops up in the other hole. He drops down and pops up in the other hole. Drops down and pops up in the other hole. It's like cutting the grass. Trying to get rid of the weeds by cutting the grass. It's going to keep always coming back. It's not going to work. You have to kill the roots. You got to destroy the tunnel system. This is modernism. This is the modernist. One organized modernist system. That's down to the bottom. He's got 7 heads. There's a structure and order to these heads. The first one is philosopher. Second one, believer. And the third one equals the theologian. Let me get the order right here. The order matters. Then the fourth one is the historian. The fifth one is the, what do you call it? The apologist first? 1 second.
Critic.
That's a critic, yeah, apologist later. The critic. The sixth one is the apologist. The 7th one is the reformer. Now remember, it's one guy. If you understand philosopher, you understand the other 6. If you understand reformer, you understand the other 6. But the most important of them is philosopher. One guy, one trench system, makes himself look like 7 different guys. He does not want you to know that they're connected. He wants you to believe that these are, you may have heard this term before, independent pockets of resistance. That's what he wants you to believe. One of the signs. You want to have an independent pocket. We're all independent. And then we are not connected. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Independent pockets of resistance, right? So, these are the guys. Philosopher, believer, theologian, historian, critic, apologist, and reformer. If I understand, the majority of the encyclical at the beginning is explaining philosopher. He's the most important. He's the real man. He's the scientist in the background. He's the God. Everything else is following from that. Remember about philosophy, every human being is a philosopher. Philosophy equals the actual term means love of wisdom. The definition of philosophy is scientiam rerum omnium per altissimas causas. The science of all things through the highest causes. It's a science, we put it here briefly, philosophy is a science of all things through the highest causes, or the deepest causes, altissimas, the highest or the deepest causes. Philosophy is a science of all things. How many sciences? One science. Every human being is a philosopher. No man can be without philosophy. Philosophy governs every one of our lives. So if I can change the philosophy of a man, I have changed him. If I can destroy true philosophy of a man, I have destroyed him. There's the war. Philosophy. Theology in the real world, the true world, not the world of the modernist, is actually the same as philosophy, with one exception only. Theology is a study and science of all things, but with divine revelation helping us out. Through the light of divine revelation, with the help of grace. Philosophy, not considering the help of divine revelation, the help of grace. The real world is a theological world, not a philosophical world. It's a theological world. Because God made us with grace, the way He made Adam, and He made us for heaven. So this philosopher, he's the most important, and you've got this heavy explanation of what the philosophy is in the paragraph 6 through 13. Understanding paragraph 6 through 13 is understanding everything in the encyclical.